Hey everyone, today we're looking through the characters that were the hardest or the most difficult for the entity to take into its realm. In most cases, the entity will take a character into its realm simply by absorbing a fog around them, or taking them as they die, without need for much preparation. We're going to look at the characters who took a bit more effort, and a bit more of a game plan. The characters who the entity had to actively change, as well as those who directly fought back. Let's get into it. Starting out, we have both Élodie and Felix. These two, I believe, were the characters who technically managed to evade the entity's grasp the longest, evading it for up to 14 years. When Élodie and Felix are both 14, they go with their parents to Dire Island. Their parents are part of a secret society named the Imperiati. The Imperiati are a mysterious group, but they appear to be aware of the entity and the realm. They bring their children to the island in order to prepare them, whatever that means. One day when they are exploring the island, Élodie, Felix, and 3 others, in a group known as the Pariahs, find an abandoned internment camp that was used by the Blight in the First Opium War. From Élodie's perspective, the entity seems to force her to summon it inside of the camp, with the law stating she was compelled to touch the ice-cold sand and draw a circle with a line in the middle. This appears to be the symbol that summons or shows the entity's presence, appearing in other characters' stories, such as Lisa Sherwood's. They are then attacked in the camp by the entity's claws, that appear from a strange fog. The ground shakes and their hearing is muffled. Élodie and Felix's parents and some other Imperiati parents come to save them. They do save them, but they are either taken by or killed by the entity, and nowhere to be found when the fog dissipates. So the entity tried to draw Felix and Élodie in, presumably to take them, but fails. 14 years on, and Élodie is still searching for what happened, obsessed over the event. Felix, on the other hand, has pushed down the trauma, and focuses more so on his architectural firm. Élodie is then taken when she goes into some Paris catacombs, and is stabbed by a Black Veil cult member. The only way she thinks she can escape the situation is by drawing the same symbol she did before with her blood, which causes the entity to take her. So the symbol it initially influenced her to trace was then used much later on once again. Felix is taken after returning to Dire Island, attempting to restore it. Whilst there, a fog appears and his father steps from it. His father turns away, back into the fog, and Felix follows. Basically, the entity tempts Élodie into summoning it seems. Then after failing, resorts to a years-long plan, letting both Élodie and Felix stew in the trauma they experienced, witnessing the entity take or kill their parents, forcing them each down very different paths. Where it may have seen potential in them to begin with, the entity used the unexpected interference of the Imperiati, and Élodie and Felix's escape to its advantage, emotionally tormenting them even more before finally snatching them for the realm. A difficult, long, and cruel plan, but one that certainly worked in the end, showing just how meticulous, but also patient the entity seems to be, if it will result in any form of benefit for its own realm. Next up we have Trapper. Trapper is kind of hard to take with an asterisk, because it's more so that he's hard to keep. Although I would still argue he was hard to take to begin with, having one of the most extreme character turnarounds throughout his lore. Evan goes from a nice, creative teenager to a murdering enforcer to Archie McMillan, his father. Evan is changed as he learns about his father, figuring out that he was the one to murder his mother, and also uncle. He even draws the scenes to convince himself. Evan's father further frames Evan for beating one of the McMillan workers, forcing this dark side on him, and making him believe he is worse than he is. Evan even briefly considers murdering his father. There's an interesting moment in the tome lore, where Evan reflects that if he killed him, he would be free. An interesting parallel to his later role as the Trapper, confined to the realm by the entity. So possibly a suggestion that the entity is manipulating Archie prior to the realm. Finally, the Macmillan workers betray Evan by snitching on him. Evan finds his drawings torn to pieces, and his father shows him a picture of his mother dying, framed above his bed. It seems that Evan is largely changed by his father. However, his father is quite likely being manipulated by the entity, and it's quite possible the entity initially planned to take Archie before Evan was shown to have more potential. It seems this way mainly just because of how wicked Archie appears to be, without much reason to be, aside a fairly generic, oh, he's just a bad guy, which is kind of boring. Evan is taken after he leads over 100 of the Macmillan workers to the mines, and seals them inside, then proceeding to break his father's legs, leaving him in the storehouse to die. Once in the realm, Evan resists the entity greatly. We see scenes where he fights the claws directly back. It's suggested that the many hooks covering Evan, piercing his skin, and causing him great pain, is a sign of the punishments the entity inflicted for Evan's lack of cooperation. I feel Evan's resistance to the entity does show that he was most definitely manipulated and coerced by the entity throughout his life, and through Archie. Even when in the realm, broken, he still tries to resist. As killers go, that's a pretty tough and drawn out take for the entity, persisting even still. Jonah is taken by the entity seemingly through a long-term, slightly convoluted scheme. I believe Jonah is actually the longest plan the entity enacts, over the course of 30 to 40 years, depending on how old Jonah is. Somewhere around that number, I think. On Jonah's 16th birthday, he receives a string of numbers in an unaddressed card. He has no idea what they mean, but they bother him greatly. The numbers, after haunting him throughout his life, lead him to a graveyard in Chile, after he converts them to coordinates. However, these numbers also include 2 dates. After further inspection, Jonah puts the numbers into an ancient calendar, known as the Tenerian calendar. The first half of the numbers translate to his birthday, the second half give him another date, today, or his today, the day he solved the numbers basically. This whole ordeal seems to break Jonah in a way, with Jonah expressing that for once, numbers no longer made sense. Whilst he is stunned by the numbers, a fog creeps up on him, wrapping him and taking him. We can presume therefore that the entity was definitely responsible for the unaddressed letter. We can see other similar letters in game, seemingly from the entity, such as the sealed envelope offering, and also the birthday invitation that the Observer receives in Arcus 129. This whole numbers situation is an incredibly manipulative and cruel way to break Jonah, letting him build himself up only to strike him down, likely for the emotional value it holds, which is beneficial to the entity. It also shows how scary and omnipotent the entity is, capable of knowing the future and even plotting the exact moments of certain characters' lives. Regardless, this was a far more complex scheme than almost any other survivor, who were typically just snatched from the woods or something. Spirit is a character who wasn't exactly hard directly, but more so hard because of how much work the entity put in indirectly. The entity, a bit like with Trapper, seemed to actually want Rin's father originally. The lore states that he hears whispers, and is kept up at night by them, speaking to him of failure. Rin's father gets so caught up on the Yamaoka legacy that he slowly becomes built up with anger as he fails to uphold it. He takes his anger out on Rin and her mother, and the entity seems to goad him on. Meanwhile though, the entity does seem to interject, playing into Rin's own fears of becoming like her ancestors, and seemingly pushing her in ways for her to access her inner rage and channel her ancestors, leading to blinding outbursts of anger where she becomes someone she dislikes. It's up for debate, I feel, whether this dragon in her heart, as it's said, is really actually her Yamaoka blood, or it's just the entity. I personally think it could be the entity. It's just how Rin explains away this feeling of unpleasant rising anger that she otherwise can't explain, particularly as after this moment she thinks of beating her bullies, tearing them limb from limb, even saying, "What dark thoughts are these?" That to me sounds more like an entity thing, and less so a Yamaoka thing. Rin begins to help her father to save the estate by working a job, whilst attending university. However, Rin's father is fired from his job. He snaps and kills Rin's mother, and gravely injures Rin. In a moment of pain and anger, Rin agrees to join the entity, with blood and vengeance in mind. So all in all, the entity is kind of doing a long-term, multi-person manipulation here, focusing on the whole Yamaoka family, or mainly Rin and her father. It could even be argued that it began its manipulation way back with Kazan, who is the source of the family's supposed curse. So although it's not actually that hard to take Rin in a literal sense, the work done to make Rin, an innocent person with no anger in them, into a vengeful, angry spirit is certainly a difficult feat, and extremely messed up. Kate is mainly just hard for the entity to get, because she manages to escape it once, and nearly fights it off the second time. I don't have an abundance of things to say, but my inkling on why she was able to do this was because she is one of the most pure-souled characters in the game. In the first instance, in her tome lore, she is attacked after investigating a cave, pulsating with light, whilst moving through the woods, searching for inspiration and distracted by a feeling of darkness within her. She escapes the grabbing claws and gets away. Later on, in what seems to be the same woods, she is attacked by the entity's claws in her favourite spot, in quite an extreme and far more aggressive way. The entity seems almost threatened by her and her resistance. She attempts to beat them back with a rock, but can't damage its skin, said to be as hard as iron. The claws grab her and lift her to the sky, where a heavy cloud of fog is lingering. I mean, if that's not a frustrated entity moment, I don't know what is. This extreme display in broad daylight. This, I would say, is by far its most aggressive moment. Mikaela, in a similar way to Kate, has some near direct conflicts with the entity. Her interactions with the entity begin after she has trouble writing a horror story for a Halloween festival, and starts having nightmares of the realm itself. She seems to see the basement of the realm, often considered the heart of the entity. One night, after becoming frustrated by the nightmares, she gets her friend Julian to come watch and record her as she sleeps. Whilst asleep, Mikaela levitates and a claw of the entity slams through the bathroom door. Mikaela wakes up and slams the door shut. The lights go out and the claw is gone. Mikaela goes to work, and upon returning, Julian is gone. And from what it seems, he is either taken by the entity or killed by it, similar to Élodie and Felix's parents. Mikaela leaves her apartment once more, and feels like she is being watched, with the entity appearing as a shadow on the wall. However, Mikaela appears to escape the entity's grasp, as she whispers a protective spell before the entity can get her. Mikaela arrives at the festival she was preparing for, and improvises a story, which I believe is a recounting of the entity, the realm, and Julian's disappearance. Essentially what she's just experienced, her own lore, which is possibly what allows the entity to then boldly snatch her from the stage once the story is over. We don't hear the story, but that's my best guess at what the story would be. Mikaela evades the entity twice despite 2 attacks, and haunting and invasive dreams, making her one of the most, if not the most, resistant survivor. The artist is a character who takes a while for the entity to take, slowly whittling her down throughout the years until she is broken enough for the realm. I think the reason the entity hard focuses so much on taking her is that it sees potential in her. It's incredibly cruel. The entity and its crows appear throughout her life, and at points Kamina believes they are actually almost like guardians watching over her. The presence of the crows does appear to be the entity though, due to how strangely they act, and even their appearance in Chile is odd. The entity seems responsible for the death of Kamina's brother, Matthias, potentially coaxing him to the stream where he dies. The crows then later stop Kamina from jumping off a bridge, saving her. They then become a large part of Kamina's image and art. Once Kamina is captured by the Black Veil, the crows kill the cult members but also her friends, suggesting the crows are more sinister than Kamina thought, and she blames herself for the death of her friends. This trust gained, which is then struck away, is likely the strategy the entity took in manipulating and breaking Kamina, giving her the guardian crows in moments of pain, only to have them murder her friends and shatter that trust, all the while making her believe that she is in some sort of control of this situation. It's a wicked scheme, executed over the course of Kamina's life, and is definitely one of the entity's more cruel and long-term manipulations. Wraith is a case similar to that of the artist, where the entity appears to play the long game, slowly inflicting many instances of pain and suffering throughout Philip's life, until he snaps. However, it's debatable how much the entity influences his early life. It could be argued to be bad luck, with Philip growing up in the midst of a civil war. With that said, the entity could have still intervened, sending hope through characters like Fernanya, only to cruelly kill them, to compel Philip to get his revenge on those who killed her. Again, this one is up for debate, I feel, whether his story is simply tragic, or if it's made tragic by the entity's intervention. The definite introduction of the entity's manipulation is after Fernanya's death, where we can read a line about an inner darkness growing, and a tendril from another world grasping Philip's heart. It seems like no coincidence too that after leaving Nigeria and starting over in America, that Philip lands a job at Autohaven Wreckers, a place which runs a secret body disappearing service that Philip unknowingly helps in. Again, it could be wrong place, wrong time, but that seems almost too coincidental, and I feel it's quite possible the entity somehow managed to guide Philip to Azarov and the Wreckers Yard, where his trauma would resurface and result in him snapping and killing once more. Much like Evan, it seems that the entity stalked Philip since childhood, seeing the potential he had, ultimately guiding and manipulating his life and leading him to the realm. Another long-term plan that took a lot of work, just to take him for its trials. Nurse, I feel, is another debatable one. Whether it was her own doing, but also bad luck, that led her down a path of destruction, or if the entity had a significant hand in her downfall. I would argue again, the entity definitely intervened, at the very least. There's a section in the tome lore that hints at this directly, where a patient questions Sally if the trial has begun, suggesting the entity is present, and had a hand in Sally's arrival at Crotus Pren, and the horrific years she spent there, and possibly even the death of Sally's husband, Andrew Smithson, which sets her down a bad path. Andrew is killed in a freak logging accident, his head caved in by a falling tree. Sally is left alone and forced to the asylum for work, the patient slowly altering her mind and thoughts over the years, until finally she snaps and kills everyone. So, likely another long-laid plan by the entity, lasting 2 decades before it took Sally, in a broken state and responsible for over 50 murders. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and please do let me know who you think the toughest take for the entity was, down below. Thanks, and goodbye.